Welcome everyone to the CEO AMA public stream. And thanks for putting questions in. Sam, you want to kick us off?
Yes. Okay, so since March is Sleep Awareness Month, what are your sleeping habits? Do you rise early? Do you rise late? And how many hours do you aim to sleep? And how many do you actually get, like on average?
Thanks for that. A couple of things. I'm on the west coast of the US, and those people tend to go to bed relatively early. Kind of, it's like the whole although there's different time zones, like sports and stuff like that, kind of make everyone's schedule a bit more similar. So I think on the East Coast, you tend to go to bed later, and on the West Coast, so we're early. So dinner is 6:30 yesterday. And we had dinner with a friend who was sailing. He was already a bit peckish. We went to bed at 10. Normally we aim for 9:30, and we get up at 5:30 for workout. And I'll tell you, mic is open. I can't mute you. And it's fun because I have my sister over, so we had a workout out with 4 of us. I think other than that, we were fortunate enough to be able to buy an H Sleep, and it's an air conditioning for your bed, and it really improved my quality of sleep and Karen's. I sleep hotter than my wife, which is common gender-wise, but this way I can kind of cool down the bed a bit more, so it allows you to differentiate the left and right. So big fan of the product. I was afraid it would make a lot of noise, but it's super silent, and it's called 8 Sleep. It's a YC company.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Stefan.
Are we skipping 2?
I saw async, so.
Oh yeah, perfect. Let's go to the live ones. Yeah, Stefan, number 3.
Yeah, thanks. So if you could be one person from the past or present for one day, which one would you pick and what would you do all day?
It's a great question. There's so many people to choose from. I once did something Leonardo da Vinci themed, and I think the Renaissance kind of era is very appealing. But I think sometimes I think about, I like to do like many jobs for just one day. Like I'd love to be like an excavator operator for one day, and I'd love to do like many things for just one day. I'd love to like work in a fast food restaurant for one day. And that seems, on one hand, that seems kind of, well, more doable than the meeting an historic figure. But on the other hand, it's not a market that's catered to very much, maybe because people cause damage and because like you're not very effective on your first day and then they train you when you leave. So I wonder whether there's a market for that. I'd pay for that. Brian?
Sid, for all the time we spent together, I haven't asked you this, I should have. I'd be curious, I know this is a public stream, but what is the biggest surprise of being a public company CEO?
I think 2 things come to mind. First of all, it's relatively easy if you have the right team. So I think especially the whole G&A team is super important. So you, Robin, Wendy, there's a lot of, most of the things are on your plate, and I'm not experienced. I'm not very qualified, and you take care of it, and it's great. The other thing is that there's CEOs who try to kind of say, okay, well, the stock price can be a distraction, and I'm like, okay, well, got it. So we wrote like in the short term, it's a voting machine, long term, it's a weighing machine. I was really afraid of people in the company getting distracted, but I think we've been pretty good about that as a company. I think there's just more stuff. And like last week, our stock price rose, and it actually made some administrative stuff more complicated. So like it's not that it wasn't like team member morale or stuff like that, but there's just a lot of administrative stuff, and just the volatility makes things more complicated. And also we live in there's higher volatility now than there's been for some years, so maybe we're getting an extra portion, but that's been surprising. And I think that these CEOs that try to warn me were right. It's just that they weren't very articulate about it, and I hope someday that we can be a bit more articulate just about that, just like we'll be a bit more articulate hopefully about the IPO process in an upcoming blog post.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for asking. John.
Hey Sid, I really like your Zoom background. I'm just curious like how and why you chose that. I know you typically go with like whatever the GitLab kind of theme of the moment is, so this seems a bit different.
Yeah, I tend to have either the GitLab values or GitLab the DevOps platform as a background. I think we had an 80s themed event like last year, and this stuck around in my Zoom background. And I thought it was fun. I feel, I don't know, energetic today, and people seem to appreciate it. So I'm keeping it in the rotation for the rest of the day.
Definitely giving off the good vibes. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and we're remote. We don't get to see each other in person. We're missing a lot of stuff, but the background is something you have remote that you don't have in person, or be really awkward to hold this background behind you. So I encourage us to experiment with it. Miles.
Hi, Sid. I was just wondering, in your career as both an entrepreneur and now a CEO, how often do people who should know better, be it like analysts, VCs, or other people, ask you questions that aren't the right questions, aren't the best questions? And what prompted this is during the investor callbacks after our most recent earnings call, I just noticed that not all analysts were, in my opinion, answering or asking the right questions. And I was just wondering how often you see that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the premise of your question is wrong. I think it's very hard for them to ask the right questions because they have only so much time per company. So they're constrained, just like we have to, like we call back tens and tens of investors, but they call with tens and tens of companies. So for them, they don't have so much prep time. So it is learning, and hopefully there's a misunderstanding. They ask the wrong question. We do give the right answer and then change their perspective. So I thought that considering the time they have to spend on one company, they were super insightful. Also noticed a lot of investors asked, like, what are other analysts asking about? Is there something that everybody gets wrong? Some people ask. So they understand that they can't like cover everything, and they ask great questions to try to make up for that. So although for us, we know this company inside and out, we're like, oh, of course it wasn't work like that. But like that's because we live this company day in, day out. And I thought they were great. It's also something I underestimated is like, they want company, like it's much more convenient for them if companies kind of look the same. If you have something that's different, like for us, that's Jihu, which has some footnotes in our filings. That's tough for them to get around. It's everything that looks like another subscription-based company makes their lives a lot easier. That's something I underappreciated. Miles, I want to give you the chance to respond.
Yeah, thanks for that insight. I think that's a good response. However, and I think you're maybe right. However, it makes me question their opinions on the company a little bit more, just because sometimes they just maybe need to do a little more research. And I understand their job is really hard. Everyone's trying their best, but I guess it just goes to show how hard it is to be right about things.
Yeah, it is very hard. And I think it shows that sometimes there's just a misunderstanding, and that misunderstanding can really affect their perception of your future potential. So that's why we're doing those calls. That's why Brian flew out to New York City last week to get more airtime, because it'd be a big waste of money if there's something they didn't know that would really change their perception, or a misunderstanding that changes their perception. Brian, since this is so close to IR, I want to give you the chance to chime in as well.
No, absolutely. There's a process that you go through before you go public, as you go public, and as a public company. And Sid and I have meet with investors, all the time to basically tell the story. Typically when you have board members and investors and analysts, they all invest in a category or advise board companies in categories. And so either they're sales and market expert in software and SaaS, or they've been on other boards like in our category. And so there's a degree of familiarity. But Sid and I spend a lot of time speaking with investors and analysts just to retell the story, tell them once, tell them twice, tell them 3 times. And so we've met with about 40 investors so far after earnings, and the goal is to meet with roughly about 75 before the end of the quarter.
Thanks for your perspective.
Nikki.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Sid. Wondering if you have any plans for the upcoming Family and Friends Day tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. So GitLab, we got this great Family and Friends Day where you treat it like a vacation day. I certainly am. I'm taking the day off from my regular work. In the morning, I've got a few kind of personal things, including talking with tax advisors about gift giving. It's sometimes a bit harder tax-wise than you imagine, especially if you, I'm a Dutch national who moved to the US. So it's a bit more complex. Sometimes feels a bit weird to spend extra time when you're trying to do what I perceive as the right thing in giving, but it is what it is. So we're going to spend some time. Luckily, I got a great team to work with, and that makes it very enjoyable. In the afternoon, me and my sister will go shopping, and there's one thing especially that I'm looking forward to, and I'm gonna talk about that not in the public stream, but a bit later. So hang on after we close the live stream. Victor.
Thanks.
We can skip my questions after that. But anyway, my first question is like, would you recommend to join the CEO Shadow program before or after contribute if it happens, of course, given still the COVID and everything else?
I think join the CEO Shadow program. I think it's a great opportunity. I would have loved to have when I was working at companies, not as a CEO, but what's the logic before?
The logic is very simple. As I am like 9 hours ahead of your time zone, once if it will be in Nashville, I want to either go before Nashville to the US or stay there during the CEO Shadow program. And that's the logic. So like
combine it with the visit to the US, so you don't have to fly back and forth.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would take the slot you can get. I think when I'm at my best, like, is it before or after contribute? Or
do you plan to travel around that? That's as well like.
I don't know, but my agenda is open to all team members, so you can have a peek at my agenda.
I wasn't thinking about that. Thank you.
Good. You got another question about influence.
Yeah, you mentioned in the previous answer Jihu, and that just as I really love our culture here at GitLab, I wanted to ask, like, do they have asked me anything with you, or do they have asked me anything with their own leadership, or you don't know?
That might be an interesting idea to do that. In general, over time, our influence becomes less. We become much more like a financial investor. Although there's different connections we have, because, for example, they're also contributors to GitLab, the open core project. So that's another relationship. But that seems to be good. We seem to be doing well there. So over time, you should expect that to decline. And if Stella is watching this, CEO AMA for Jihu, why not?
Well, as a follow-up to that, will any team members from Jihu be invited to contribute events?
I don't think so. Thanks for asking. I think it's really an independent company, and I think that will be blurring the lines a bit too much.
Nice. Well, did we have something to discuss with the live stream off? Is that what you said, Sid?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me
Thanks,
turn
everyone.
off the live